Welcome to Open BXRx on BronxNet. I'm your host, Sonyi Lopez, inviting you to get social with us at BronxNet TV on Instagram and Twitter, and BronxNet Community Television on Facebook. Have you participated in the 2020 census? If not, don't worry, you still have until September to make our Bronx count. Responding to the census affects the amount of funding your community receives, how your community plans for the future, and your representation in government. And now more than ever, the Bronx needs you. Joining us now to share more information and updates on our participation so far is Mr. Jeff Behler. He is the Regional Director at the US Census Bureau. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us again.
Absolutely. It's great to see you again.
Great to see you as well. So it's been a few months since we last spoke. We spoke back in April, I believe. First, can you please help us define what the census is for our viewers just tuning in?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the once a decade count that we do to highlight some of the things you mentioned. Ensure our communities have their fair share of representation and the hundreds of billions of dollars of federal funding for important programs like Medicare or Medicaid, or improving our roads and transportation systems, from education, national school lunch and breakfast programs, Pell Grants, Head Start, supplies for our children at school, and then to support healthcare, whether that's the number of beds or the number of hospitals in our community. This is the way to ensure your community gets its fair share for the next 10 years.
Thank you, Jeff. Now, how is the Bronx doing? How are we doing in terms of the count? What are the updates? Can you give us an update on the count here in the Bronx?
Yeah. So as of yesterday, about 3 o'clock, 56.4% of the households in the Bronx have self-responded to the 2020 census. That means they've gone online, they've called it in over the phone, or they filled it out on paper. If you want to compare, and it's not quite a fair comparison, but if you want to compare to how the Bronx did in 2010, at the end of the 2010 census, the Bronx was at 64% self-response rate. So we got a little room to grow, but we have time to get there.
Right. And what is that time, Jeff? What is the deadline for people to submit the census right now?
Yeah, so whether you self-respond, go online at 2020census.gov, call one of our 13 toll-free telephone numbers. For English, it's 844-330-2020. Or if you pull out that questionnaire that you have hanging on your fridge or sitting on your coffee table, fill it out, mail it back in. You have until the end of September 30th. That's also the day that we'll stop knocking on doors and trying to collect that information via conversation in person.
Got it. Thank you so much. So now I want to know about the hard to count areas. What percentage of the Bronx is a hard to count area, and how are people being outreached to during COVID-19?
Yeah, so it's hard to come up with a specific percentage for the Bronx. We know that every neighborhood has its unique characteristics, and whether that's large families, whether that's multiple families living in a single family home, whether that's a high percentage of renters, children under the age of 5, of course, minority communities. These are all characteristics of communities that are harder to count. And what we've done, our partners have been amazing, from the borough president to council member Jonai, to organizations like ICNA Relief or Van Nest Neighborhood Alliance. They have been amazing partners, in getting the word out to their communities on what's at stake for the 2020 census, but doing it in a way where it's coming from a trusted voice and the message resonates with the community members. And we are so dependent on our partners, who in the Bronx have been amazing. And we'll continue to work with them, continuing working to get the message out. And now they're starting to invite us, now that some of the restrictions have been lifted. We're going to parks or food distribution sites, and our staff are showing up there with iPads, and walking the lines or walking a community park to see if there's anyone who hasn't filled it out, to give them the opportunity to fill it out right then and there, using our resources, using our internet and Wi-Fi, using our device. So we'll continue to do that all the way through the end of September to ensure every person, every household in the Bronx gets its opportunity to complete their 2020 census.
Right. And Jeff, you kind of hinted at this earlier, but as we know, Bronx sites have been hit hard by COVID-19. Are hospitals also affected by the census count, and how can being counted influence the funding that our health services receive?
Yeah, great question. And absolutely, hospitals are impacted by an inaccurate census count, because when we talk about the funding that comes into communities for healthcare, it's for hospitals or hospital beds. It's for emergency personnel. It's for supplies for those emergency personnel. It's for transportation to and from clinics for those that may need that transportation. And I can't think of an easier way to support your healthcare professionals and your healthcare community by taking 5 minutes to fill out your 2020 census. Ensure your community gets its fair share of funding. Ensure your healthcare professionals get what they need to ensure they can serve the community.
Right. And how about our children? Schools have been closed. Education received huge budget cuts in the beginning of the COVID-19 crisis. Please tell us about the importance of counting babies and children during the census as well.
Yeah, when you think about, we do this once every 10 years. So a baby who's 2 today will be 12 the next time we conduct a census. And think of all the different programs that child will touch, from national school lunch or breakfast programs. They may need Head Start or aftercare, may supplies in that school. When we look at the size of our classrooms, census data is used to determine, do we need new schools? So let's make sure we get a complete and accurate count, so the people who are making those decisions, whether it has to do with healthcare or it has to do with education and opening up additional schools or adding teachers and classrooms to the schools that are there, let's make sure those decision makers have the best possible data to make well-educated, informed decisions. How we do that? Take the 5 minutes, invest in the next 10 years by filling out your census today.
And it's only 10 quick questions. Another thing, Jeff, a lot of people have concerns about their personal information. How is the census ensuring that personal information is not shared?
Yeah, absolutely. Title 13, a federal law that was put in place in 1954, protects every piece of data we collect. Under this law, we cannot release information to anyone at any time that's at the person or household level. So when we release our data, it's at a state level, a city level, a census tract level. It does not include names or addresses, because by law, we cannot release that information. So local, state, and federal law enforcement can never access our data at any time for any reason, which includes housing authorities, local police. It includes IRS or Homeland Security or Customs and Immigration. No one can access that data at any time for any reason, period. In addition, for all those census takers that are out there knocking on doors, it's okay to open up your door to them, because the data they collect is also protected under Title 13. And all census employees take an oath of confidentiality for life, meaning if we were to release information about a person or a household, we'll be imprisoned up to 5 years and fined up to $250,000. We take this seriously because we know the public's trust is the foundation of getting a complete and accurate census.
Another thing I read, Jeff, is that there's no citizenship question this time around. Is this the first time in the census that question is not being added to the list?
Yeah, I think the last time it was asked was, I believe, 1970, and it hasn't been asked since. And of course, there was a fight, to whether or not to include this. Supreme Court ruled it could not be included on the census. So absolutely, people need to understand, we do not ask for citizenship status on the census, whether we're knocking on your door, or whether you fill it out online. In addition, we never ask for bank account or credit card information. We never ask for money. We never ask for anything on behalf of a political party. And we never ask for social security numbers. If you hear that information, more than likely it's a scam. You can reach out to us, 844-330-2020. We can do employee verifications. We can let you know whether or not a scam is going on in your community, or at least validate whether or not it's a legitimate survey that may be being done by someone else.
Thank you for that. Another important purpose of the census is, of course, representation in our neighborhoods. What is the census's role in the upcoming 2020 elections?
Yeah, so when you think about that other key reason why the census is so important, it is representation. From the number of seats that New York State will have in the U.S. House of Representatives, and the next congressional delegation will be based upon the 2020 census. The Electoral College will be based upon the 2020 census. And then when you look at the state level, from drawing voting precincts and school districts, it's important that in order for your community to get the representation it deserves, and to ensure that representation matches the diversity of the community, or understands the needs of that community, we have to make sure that your community, and throughout every neighborhood throughout the Bronx, gets a complete and accurate count. And again, for those of you who filled it out, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it, but your job's not done. We need you to talk to your neighbors, those you worship with, those you work with. Ask them if they filled it out. If they haven't, tell them how easy it was. Let them know that it's safe based upon what we spoke about here today, and let them know what's at stake for the next 10 years.
Right. Before we go, Jeff, of course, can you give us all the different ways that a person that's viewing right now can complete their census right now today?
Yeah, absolutely. 2020census.gov. Click on the respond button. Format it for a smartphone, for a tablet, a laptop. You can do it right now as you're watching this video. You can pull out your smartphone and take 5 minutes to do that. You can call one of our 13 toll-free telephone numbers, one for each language that we support. For English, it's 844-330-2020. Again, if you have that paper questionnaire laying around, now's the time to fill it out, put it in that postage-paid envelope, mail it back in. Because the fourth way, which we've started on August 3rd, census takers will be knocking on the doors of every household that has yet to respond to the census. So if you don't want someone knocking on your door, go online, call it in over the phone, fill out that paper form, and get it back in.
You heard it here, folks. Thank you so much, Mr. Jeff Behler, the Regional Director from the US 2020 Census, for joining us again today.
Thank you.
Folks, again, the website is 2020census.gov. Please make our Bronx count. We only have but so much time.